In 1946, an earthquake hit Canada, Vancouver, on June 23rd. The earthquake was rated a 7.3 on the Richter scale. An earthquake this large was caused by two plates colliding into each other. How bad was the earthquake? The earthquake was able to tear down roads, throw poles off, destroy buildings, and their rubble crushed cars and people, as you can see in these two photos. Unfortunately, at that time, Canada wasn't prepared. Now, we have choppers, people that can rappel into water, scuba divers to help those that may be underwater, and full rescue teams all around Canada. We could be deployed anywhere, and we are much more prepared now thanks to the Canadian Rescue Team. What are you going to need to survive? First off is your personal gear. These are my personal recommendations of the things that I've found out and heard. The first thing that you have to consider is that after an earthquake, people may not always be happy, and people may not be rushing to help each other. It could be a violent time, and you may have to be prepared for that. I recommend what is known as tactical style clothing. For example, a tactical jacket. Many pockets, many uses, doesn't tear, keeps water off of you. The pants are also important. Tactical pants, tactical boots, and a tactical belt. This is the toughest and heaviest duty stuff. A black, large backpack to carry all of your kit in. The next one may seem odd to some people, a bulletproof vest. Or a stab vest. During times like this, there can be explosions first off, that can cause shrapnel to fly towards you and into your chest. That wouldn't be good. At this point in time, there will be rioters and looters. There could be stray bullets shot by police or by criminals, or you could be intentionally targeted for the things you have because you're prepared. A helmet and goggles are important. The helmet will keep falling debris off of your face. The goggles are simply there to keep dust out of your eyes, and also a shamrock or something to cover your mouth is a good idea. This will be useful later on. However, like an hour, so once the earthquake happens, for a good hour, dust still won't settle. Dust can be extremely dangerous, especially if you live near a nuclear reactor. If it does go off, which has happened to Hiroshima, you're going to want to not breathe in any of that dust to prevent against cancer and other diseases. That's why the next item is a gas mask. The other thing is, if you're in a building, it could catch on fire. And you might think, well, I'd probably rather have a fire extinguisher. You're going to want to have that. However, more people die from the CO2 and smoke inhalation besides the fire. Fires don't spread that quickly, but the actual smoke does. If you're high up, you're going to need one of these to get through. You're also going to have some decent gloves. The worst thing is having cuts on your hand, and it's one of the most places that you will get cut. Hard knuckle gloves are my recommendation, as they can also be used as weapons. Last thing is a bright vest. Normally I would recommend having a very thin bright vest. Some companies will even sew these into darker vests, and then you can flip it inside out, so one side will be dark and the other side would be a bright fluorescent vest. If you're walking along a highway or a road, this could be very useful, or if you're in need of help, this can also help you be found. Next is your tools. A fire axe is one thing that you're going to want to have. The fire axe will be able to cut through doors, walls, help you get out of any situation that you might be stuck in. The knife is also a very useful thing. A fixed blade knife is much stronger than any other form of knife. What it means to be a fixed blade knife is it means that the steel goes from the blade to the handle and is never connected. It's one single piece of metal with things added onto it. For example, this one has a larger handle and a compass. However, it's much stronger. This can obviously be used to cut things. There's so many uses for a knife. It can be used to, if you're falling down a cliff, or if you're climbing something, it can even be used to stick into the ground. The next one is a multi-tool. I recommend Swiss multi-tools because they tend to be the best. This will have everything on it from a corkscrew to a knife to a saw to scissors. Next up is known as a baton light or a long flashlight. The reason that I would also recommend having a small one. However, the long ones have many uses. They can be used as hammers, batons, such and such. The next one is card jacks. In the scenario of an earthquake, people may be trapped and you may need to help them if you so choose, or you could be trapped. A crowbar as well. These are all simple things that you could be trapped. Fire extinguisher in case of a fire, or in case one of your buddies is on fire, you're going to want to have one of these. The next one creates fire, and that's a flare gun. Flare gun is obviously just signal for help. In Canada, it is illegal to carry a weapon on you for the simple purpose of having it for self-defense, which means you cannot carry a knife on you for the sake of self-defense. In this scenario here, there could be bad people, and you may use something in self-defense, but you may not carry something specifically for that purpose. The things you have on you: fire axe. There's all reason to have these. A fire axe to cut things can also be used as a wedging weapon. The knives are obviously used to cut things, but they can also be used as shivs or shanking weapons. The police light, or the baton light, whatever you want to call it, obviously can be used as a melee or a blunt force trauma weapon. Same thing with the crowbar. The fire extinguisher can be used as a less lethal or a deterrent by spraying into someone's face. However, obviously, being hit with a full steel fire extinguisher would not feel good, and flare guns have also been used in self-defense. These are only considering that you need to go to these extraordinary options. Next up is first aid. First aid kits should be to a certain size. You don't want to have too small of a first aid kit, and you don't necessarily want to have too large of a first aid kit. I would always recommend the more first aid supplies that you can have is better. But in certain scenarios, you may want to have only a lot of certain things. For example, gloves, bandages, things that you know how to use. This first aid kit has some stuff that the average person wouldn't know. So the other thing besides first aid kits would be having first aid training, possibly emergency paramedic training or advanced survival trainings. A few things that is in this one which I could recommend: a tourniquet. That's a large piece of cable that can be tightened. For example, if your arm is bleeding, you're going to want to stop the blood flow to your arm and then go for medical assistance. You're going to want to have trauma shears to cut off clothes. You're going to want to have gloves, eye patches. One thing that's in this one that the average person wouldn't want, unless you have the training, is a trach tube. Pretty much if your throat's been swollen up for whatever reason, you'll simply take a scalpel, which you could also have in your kit, cut the throat, and then insert the tube. Obviously not everyone will be able to use that. However, it's something that the person that has this thought that they would use. Bandages, adhesive bandages, non-adhesive bandages, triangle bandages, quick clot combat spray, quick clot combat foam powder would also be a good one. Scissors, scalpels, tweezers, thermometers, and solar blankets or emergency blankets are another useful thing to have on you. Last but not least, or not last but not least, but some other stuff that you're going to want to have is a fire starting kit. You can see all the stuff that's in here, lots and lots of stuff. These things are obviously useful. Matches, lighters, flint and steel, cotton, and then fire starters, stuff that you're going to need. The next thing is known as a life straw. It looks pretty odd. You're going to want to boil the water if you can, but otherwise you can always just use a life straw. Life straw gets out 99% of the bacteria, and to get out the dirt you can simply throw a shirt over it or whatever. So then you're also going to need your food. Obviously this will go into meals ready to eat. They look gross, but I've eaten them and most of them are pretty good. Also in this scenario, you're only going to need food for a few days. With a first aid kit, or with a survival kit, one of the things you have to think about is replenishing it. These will go for 5 years, so you don't really have to worry about replenishing these too often. And a survival shelter. Last few things that you may or may not want to have is going to be all the way to the left, the handcuffs. Obviously there may be bad times or bad people, or you may just simply need to restrain something. I would recommend you having some form of camel pack. That's that camouflage thing. that would be, there's water in there, and then you can drink out of that, and the tube will simply come through your backpack. Walkie-talkies underneath there. Obviously to communicate with people. To the right of that, there's lots of rope. I'll come back to the rope. Above that, you can see a laser pointer. You might be thinking, why? One of the most distracting things and obvious things to pilots is a laser. High-powered lasers like this can blind people. However, simply shining them at helicopters doesn't tend to do that much harm, and it can get your life saved. So shining at a helicopter, shining at airplanes, people will notice you, and they will come to help you. Beside that, that yellow thing is a radio, a standard radio. You need to be able to listen to the emergency broadcast network. Underneath that, you see 3 sleeping bags. I have slept in this exact sleeping bag. This is the Canadian Forces sleeping bag. I'd recommend this one. It comes in 3 layers and a bag. It can also be, honestly, this is one of my favorite sleeping bags. I've slept in only, there's 3 layers. I've used 1 and 2 layers, and I've been perfectly good through fall conditions. During the summer, I tend to only use 1 layer, and you have all 3 there, so even in the scenario of winter and it's snowing, you could simply lay in this and you'd be fine. Above that, you see 2 Russian Special Forces. Obviously, not what I want you to bring. What I want you to bring is the rappels kit. That's what's around their legs and wrists. Rock climbing gear, pretty much, and that's where the rope also comes in. If you're in a building and for whatever reason the stairs have been broken down, and some small buildings may only have 1 staircase, and the elevators won't work at this time, you're going to have to rappel for whatever reason. Or if there's a fire, sometimes you may even have to rappel. It all depends on your situation. So that is the final things that I have recommended you to bring. Obviously, there's other things, and depending on your situation, you may need to have other stuff. If you know that you're in a remote area, more food and more water. If you know that you're in a bad neighborhood, you may want to think about some other self-preparedness things. You're going to also want to have multiple kits and different styles of kits. For example, this would be your big kit. This would be known as your doomsday kit, or your stuff has hit the fan kit. This one you'd probably keep in your house. If you live by yourself, you simply every day throw it into your car. I would recommend you having a separate kit for your car that would obviously contain extra stuff like pylons, road flares, road signs, all that. You're going to want to have one that you carry every day on you, EDC, a small little pack that can be brought pretty much anywhere. And then obviously this one will be kept in your house. Having another first aid kit in your house. For example, this one's rather large. Even simply having something the size of just a single one of these, you'd have all the stuff. However, having a large one in your house would not be a bad idea. Keeping additional water in your house, keeping additional food in your house, pretty much. And then you want to have your EDC, and then with your EDC, your everyday carry, you want to be able to get to your vehicle, so you can get your get home bag, which is the one in your vehicle. So that way, even if your car doesn't work, you can get home. Obviously, after an earthquake, you want to avoid going onto bridges, also going underneath bridges, since they can collapse at any time. So that's pretty much the primary of my stuff. Avoid tall buildings and try not die.